So today we're interviewing Jonathan Callaghan. He is the CEO of Investor. He has been there for quite some time, over a decade, and has been CEO since 2016. Very interesting time for the company. It is obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic, so no need to explain that, but they are very highly exposed to a part of the market that is fairly COVID affected, and that is the office sector. So really interesting to talk to him about his views as to how that will go going forward.
More interesting than Jonathan or Investor is that you just had a holiday to Byron Bay.
I did have a holiday to Byron Bay, yes.
Yes.
Can you see the tan?
Yes. Yeah. You might notice that I moved around my study a little bit just to shake things up in my own little ISO holiday here in Melbourne. But how was Byron Bay? Was it busy?
Byron Bay was lovely. It wasn't as busy as I thought. So I did expect to see half of Sydney up there, but it was, it was pretty chilled. Hard to get restaurant bookings, but it did feel quite normal being up there. So very good news for people in Melbourne as restrictions are now starting to ease. That life does get back to normal once you can start to move around again.
Good on you. Really happy for you. Couldn't get a booking in a restaurant. How's that, Melbournians?
I know.
Boo-hoo.
So good.
Back to Investor and Jonathan Callaghan. Investor is one of Australia's biggest institutional landlords. They have 26 properties under management or under ownership. A valuation of circa $12 billion. Some very big trophy assets, 400 George, 420 George in Sydney, 120 Collins Street, one in Melbourne, 567 Collins Street, amongst many, many others. They have some very impressive people that work within their teams, both on design, management, leasing, and just strategies. I've had some pretty good relationships here over the years in my role in leasing at CBRE, and I can tell you firsthand, they're really, really good to deal with. Very interestingly, a major Canadian fund called Oxford has bought into Investor over the last few years. So it'll be interesting to see how that Australian created, owned, and managed company like Investor if they have changed anything that they do or how they do it with the influence of a partnership of a Canadian fund like Oxford, who's globally massive and have assets all over the world across all different sectors. So I feel really lucky and privileged that we got the CEO of Investor to come talk to us. It's unbelievable, but you just take the wins as they come. This will be a fun conversation.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on today. Just such a pleasure to hear your views as to how things are going with COVID. I might just start with you personally and I guess professionally as well, that you have been the CEO of Investor since 2016. You have been with the company for over 14 years now. And what challenges have you faced during this time that really set you up to handle this COVID pandemic?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think every crisis is a little bit different, but that said, you learn a little bit from every crisis you go through. And I think all companies learn a lot from the GFC. I think that every company was in a much better position to deal with this, every real estate company, I should say, to deal with this crisis because we didn't do silly things with our balance sheets. We didn't have too much debt. The debt we did have was it was diversified across tenor, across lender, across class. The hedging books were a little bit more sophisticated and sort of less dangerous, if you like. So, yeah, I mean, I think we learned a lot on that front, but at the same time, every crisis is different, and this is pretty unique. So it's been a profound impact to the business and to our country. And so, we had to sort of, like everyone, adapt and learn pretty quickly how to cope with this particular crisis.
With your role as CEO of Investor with close to $12 billion of Australian real estate under management, if you can sit across Josh Frydenberg or Daniel Andrews, what would you be telling them as far as how you're seeing things and what you'd like to see happening from here?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the first thing I would say to them is thank you. I mean, I think that, being a politician at the best of times is a horrible job, but being a politician at the worst of times just must be unbearable. And the sacrifice that politicians have made, the burden that they have carried and I'm sure the consequences that that's having on their physical health, their family life is really extreme. And I think everyone should be pretty thankful for the commitment these people have given to the public. The next thing I would say to them is they're doing a few things wrong at the moment, I feel. And for me, it comes around what are we trying to do here? We sort of had agreed early on that this was about suppression of the virus, that it wasn't about elimination, that it was about flattening the curve, that it wasn't overwhelming the health service, but ultimately we'd need to live with the virus in some shape, form or the other. And I feel that whilst it's not being said, we're heading towards this elimination style strategy where there's zero tolerance for any virus anywhere in the community. And I'm not sure that is the right balance. And it really is only a strategy, it seems to be, to me, a strategy that's dependent upon a vaccine coming along. And I think that is the wrong thing to do. I think that we need to learn to live with the virus, and I see that sort of manifesting in two particular places. Firstly, we need to bring people back to the CBD. That is the lifeblood of the Australian economy, is the CBD, are the CBDs, I should say. So we need to start doing more to get people back into town. The government needs to lead this. The government needs to make people feel safe to come back in. They need to give businesses the flexibility to bring their staff back in a COVID safe way. They need to do stuff around the transport. There's a lot that they can do on that front. And the other one particular area that concerns me is immigration, and basically bringing people back into the country. I feel as though there is so much they can do in this space. I feel that they're being overly zealous in terms of granting visas, in terms of the quarantine requirements. It is already, through the anecdotal conversations I have, impacting on people, hiring people, impacting upon people providing a service, because they've been reliant so long on a body of employees offshore that they can't access anymore. And there's not this instant replacement force domestically. So it is really causing issues. And I feel the quarantine quarantine requirements at the moment, I feel, is a little bit overzealous. Why there are quarantine requirements for countries with similar, penetration rates of COVID, I'm not sure why that would exist. I'm not sure why you need the full 2 weeks quarantine. I know other countries are exploring shorter quarantine periods in certain circumstances, and I just encourage the government to be really sort of pursuing those sorts of opportunities to get this country, to get the immigration rate back up as quickly as possible. Because if they don't, I feel as though a lot of the assumptions in the recent budget are going to miss the mark.
Yeah, I agree. You're obviously very exposed to the office market, and it is one of the sectors of the property market that has been hit quite hard, or very hard, by what's happened with the pandemic. What's your view for office vacancy over the next couple of years, and more particularly construction? I mean, construction activity is going to be subdued across a wide range of industries. So what's your view on office construction over the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, obviously office demand it's cyclical. We're about to go into a cyclical downturn. That's clear. It's a little bit unclear about how much of a downturn we will be going through, but there is a downturn that's going to happen. But we think that over time it will normalise. So what does that mean for the development cycle in particular? I mean, it certainly does mean that marginal developments that were just stacking up, will sort of no longer stack up. So we'll probably get mothballed. A lot of stuff that we're relying on pre-commit, those projects won't go ahead. So I do think you'll see a natural attrition in the front end of the supply line. But, as these things typically happen, they really just kick down the street 2 or 3 years. And I think that's what's really going to happen in the short term.
Over the last couple of years, Investa has partnered with a major Canadian fund called Oxford. Investa has been Australian created, owned and managed until then. Have you seen any major structural changes since they've come into the Investa group?
At this point, no. At this point, no. Oxford, though, is proving to be a wonderful client and partner for the business. We're developing a very good, candid relationship. They have large growth ambitions for the Asian market and the Australian market in particular. And so we're absolutely working with them at the moment to see how we can sort of embed and strengthen that relationship between us and how we can help them meet their growth ambitions in the next, in the short to medium term and the long term.
Oxford have a very big exposure to retail all around the world. Is that something that investors helping them diversify into here in Australia as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that they have a big exposure to retail means that they don't want any more exposure to retail. I don't think that retail's high on their list at the moment, but certainly they do have ambitions in a couple of spaces. Build to rent is one of them. They're a big believer, Oxford's a big believer in that, the build to rent product, as are we. And we're working with them at the moment to see how we can help sort of roll out that build to rent strategy in Australia for them. So there's good discussions going on at the moment in that regard.
Oh, great. Back to the office sector. You're all returning to work. I can see you're in the office today. I mean, how is Investor handling getting people back into the office and encouraging people to come back in?
I mean, I think that the way we're really approaching it is that we have been a long believer in flexible working, the benefit of flexible working. We've always had a reasonably high penetration of people that worked on, flexible arrangements. So we're a huge believer in flexible work, but we are also a huge believer in the benefits of office and working together. In the isolation period where we're all forced to work from home, did it work? Yeah, it absolutely worked, and it was reasonably effective. But was it the best way to work? No, it absolutely wasn't. We went through month end for the first time, or year end, I should say, and mistakes got made. People trying to do new things for the first time on a large scale is not the most efficient and effective way for this business to operate. We need to be together to operate optimally. So we are encouraging staff back in, but we are doing it primarily because by simply encouraging them to understand and appreciate the benefits of coming to the office and collaborating and working together, and also for their own mental health, coming in, seeing a friendly face, having a cup of coffee with someone that you like, and those sorts of things. That's what we're really focusing on, is really focusing on the positives. We're not forcing staff in. Some people have legitimate fears. Some people are looking after people that, have comorbidities. And so it's just, they have legitimate reasons not to come in. And so we're just taking a case by case basis, but basically getting staff to focus on the positives of coming back into the offices.
Jonathan, your view or the investor view, what would office vacancy look like in 2022? And also, what will the ratio of office space per person look like as well in 2022? So right now, I think we're on average, we're at 1 to 10. Is that right?
Yeah, rough, give or take.
Yeah.
I think vacancy will be higher in 2022 than it is now, but not terribly higher. And when I say higher, I'm not looking at the most recent numbers as being representative of where vacancy actually is. I do think that the numbers at the moment are being polluted a little bit by sublease numbers. And in my experience, sublease numbers are not reliable. They're very rubbery, very volatile numbers. But, I think that it's fair to say that in the next couple of years in both Melbourne and Sydney, you will see vacancy creep up. That's certainly what we're assuming, but it doesn't creep up to double-digit numbers. It will sort of be below double-digit numbers. It's certainly not, I think, as dire as, some of the numbers that you're seeing. Our view is it's not going to be as dire as some of the numbers and some of the forecasts that some people are sort of anticipating.
Sustainability is a big focus of Investor, and you do have a very strong reputation in that. Has your view around sustainability changed as a result of COVID, or is it still pretty similar to where you were last year?
Yeah, it's pretty similar, but sustainability is just really part of our DNA. It sort of infects and influences every decision that we make. And I don't really see that had COVID really changing that at all. Where you will get back to is in this whole office use debate, and I feel as though it's heading in the right direction, the discussion, because it's not this binary outcome of working from home on the one hand and the office on one hand, which one wins. The answer is absolutely in the middle somewhere. And the only way I think that you can accommodate a workforce that works at home part of the time and works in the office part of the time is through an activity-based work style design. And, I think that you will always, on that basis, have a reasonably high density in terms of the amount of people that will be in the office at any one time. The debate's always going to be around how many desks you have per 100 staff. So, instead of, at the moment, for example, we have 90 desks for 100 people, we have an ABW format. Maybe we change that to 70 per person, or 75 per person. But ultimately, I think the densities might be roughly the same moving forward. That's ignoring, though, that's just in the workspace. But when you take into account meeting room space, I think that it might expand, because one thing we're noticing here already is because you've got teams coming in and agreeing to be in the office on one particular day, meeting rooms are just getting sucked up. So, whilst I think that the densities on the work floor will absolutely be the same, we'll get over COVID, we won't have fears of sitting next to our staff. I think that there will be less desks in an office, there will be more meeting room space requirements.
Well, that leads well into the next question, which is what will amenities in offices look like car park, end of trip facility, breakout rooms, toilets? Is Investa looking to make structural changes in their, I think you have 26 assets. Will there be structural changes with these amenities going into the next year?
The short answer, going to the next year, no. But I do think that what you will see is, particularly in office design, an acceleration of a trend that's been happening for some time, which is the movement from sort of really poor quality allocated desk style office environments to far more active, interactive, activity-based work design. The benefit, and if you go into a good ABW style workspace, there is lots of different space. There's lots of big tables for collaboration, there's couches for collaboration, there's lots of meeting rooms. And, it is very user-friendly space. And part of the quid pro quo from people from move from this allocated to an activity-based work is really, and what I see is business owners really putting a lot more effort into design, making the space a lot more attractive and appealing for staff to be in, to operate in. And I think that trend is only going to accelerate in post-COVID world.
You mentioned earlier about the importance of getting people back into the CBD. What are some of the things that you think could be done to improve and future-proof our CBDs going forward?
Yeah, I think it is, infrastructure is a big one, but I feel as though most of the cities we're doing a pretty good job at that at the moment. Technology is huge. I think that making particularly public transport routes, but also every interaction a user of the city has, improving the technological footprint of that interaction is only going to help. I think a lot of it comes down to basic stuff. You need to make the city attractive to people to come back into. So it does come down to good retail. It does come down to good public amenity, and sorts of things like that. Good design. Making a place that people want to come and spend time. Theatres, etc. All that sort of stuff. But ultimately, the other thing in terms of future-proofing, probably the most important thing I think is making cities more resilient, and more resilient to climate change, and the sort of the impacts that in particular extreme heat can put on a CBD, and having plans and buildings more amenable to those sorts of weather events.
Just one of those points that you mentioned though, but if I can expand on,
Yeah.
what does good retail look like at the foot of a major office building? Like if you can handpick retail at the foot of all your 26 buildings, what would that look like?
The most important things for an office owner is a good food and beverage offering. You need to have something, it doesn't necessarily need to be anything in particular, but it just needs to be good. Like you need a good bar, you need a good restaurant, you need a good sandwich shop, you need a good salad shop. You know, one thing I would say over the last 5 years in particular, the quality of the purveyors of these services has absolutely gone through the roof. Gone are the old-fashioned bad plastic sandwich shops of, you know, the past, and you know the quality of the offering is so much higher, and it adds so much amenity to an asset to have really good food and beverage in the building.
Just a little bit on advice for younger people watching this. I mean, it is obviously a really tricky time for young people entering the workforce in the middle of a pandemic, middle of a recession. It's going to be hard for a lot of them to get jobs. I mean, what's your advice to people starting out their careers or early stages of their careers?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the most probably, and this is from my perspective a lesson hard learned, is don't have too prescriptive an idea about where you're going to end up and where you're going to be. I really focus on where you are now and the job that you've got now, and do that job to the best of your ability. I find that really good people in a business will always get looked after. And, you know, I think a good employer will always look after good employees. So my advice would be don't worry too much and don't have this very fixed view as to where your career is going to take you. Because if you have that sort of an attitude, I feel you open yourself to disappointment and unnecessary disappointment. And also you're closed-minded to opportunities that are just passing right by you. And I know that, you know, from my own experience, I stuck in a job. I was in private practice as a lawyer. I did that for like 8 years, and I just didn't like it. And it took me really 8 years of going, wow, I just don't like this, to sort of finally open my eyes and move out of that. And honestly, I just have not looked back. The second I moved out of private practice as a lawyer, everything just was better. Life was better. So I guess my number one piece of advice is just don't be too close-minded and don't be too prescriptive on where you think that your career is going to take you.
Great advice.
Any individuals or companies have stuck out to you in 2020 when most people have been quite distracted?
Yeah, it's funny, but the one person that has really stood out for me this year and is Gladys. I just thought that she had done the most incredible job. She's such a deeply impressive person, an impressive politician. And obviously we've had the events the last couple of days. But yeah, I mean, you know, I have to look through these last couple of days and just say, I just think that what she has done in New South Wales and the way she has been able to govern the state and also put in place what is clearly, I think, the best in class response in terms of contact tracing, in terms of the health response. You know, I think she deserves all credit and all kudos, basically.
Yeah, it was interesting. Mark Liebler from Arnold Block Liebler said exactly the same thing, that he thought she was his number one politician globally in terms of handling the pandemic. So I think it seems to be a pretty consistent view across the business world and probably, you know, amongst people as well. Really
yeah, she's an absolute rock star. She really is. And I really hope that she gets through the little kerfuffle that's happening at the moment.
Yeah, I'm sure she will. Jonathan, a final question. What do you think is the biggest opportunity that will come out of this crisis?
I think the biggest opportunity, I mean, and I'm not going to put a business cap on it, it's a personal cap. I think that the one thing that has happened is that everyone sort of sat back and reflected a little bit on work-life balance. And everyone sat back and reflected a little bit about even though lockdowns were horrible and isolation's awful, but and I know too much of a lockdown is a bad thing, but it has brought us a little bit closer to our families, and we've all seen a side of our kids that maybe we necessarily haven't seen before. Having an opportunity to homeschool, it was a massive pain in the bum, but ultimately it was really nice sitting down and doing year 8 maths again and struggling through that and trying to explain to your little son, how to plot linear lines on a graph. And I think that has been an amazing opportunity. It really has given everyone a little bit of opportunity to stop and smell the roses and also be grateful for what we had pre-COVID. And I think that once we get through this and we're in that Trumpian world where COVID's gone away, that we'll appreciate and be a lot more thankful for what we do have in that environment.
One more last question, if I may, but are there any habits that you've created over 2020 that you want to see continue into next year?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I have, one good habit I have developed has been the walking phone call.
Yeah, they're good. I agree.
Us real estate agents created that.
Yeah. So during lockdown, I was literally doing 23,000 steps a day because so much of my life's on the phone, and I just put the little AirPods in and just start walking. And sometimes you just find yourself in this bizarre spot. You hadn't really paid much attention of where you're going. And some phone calls went for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and you're just wandering around. So that's certainly one thing that I'm going to keep going in the future. I tend to annoy everyone in the office because I pace around the office. So I have to start taking it outside.
You'll have to pace up and down George Street or something.
Yeah. But it's a lot better than walking through the kitchen 100 times. So
yeah.
Jonathan, thank you very, very much for taking time out of your schedule to talk to us and share your views, plans, and learnings from this year and this virus, which is hopefully soon to be behind us. It's been a real privilege having you on to lead the way, and we're super grateful and look forward to sharing this. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.